Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Fulham. I'm your host, Mark. That's an unusual pick from the team. It shows a bit more faith in my ability than Marco Silva has in a certain Jonah Kusiasare, which is a little bit depressing. We'll get into that. But this evening, I am joined by two lovely gentlemen. Starting on my left, that took a moment. Starting on my left, we have Dave at Crave. How are you doing, Dave?
Very well, Mark. Very well. Nice to be, one of the other guys talking today and not having to host. I can switch off a little bit, enjoy my beer, and just get involved in the chat. So, thanks for taking the reins.
Always happy to do so. I'm not having a beer though. I'm committing the ultimate sin. What even are rules anymore? I've got myself a half pint of Prava and wine in there. Craziness. So I don't believe in the rules. Neither should we. We're gonna be freewheeling and doing it a cappella style. And helping me with that, I got Mike. How are you, Mike?
Yeah, good. Thank you, buddy. Although I feel like I'm letting the side down now because I've just got a glass of water. So yeah, sorry about that.
That's fine. No problem at all. I'm sure we can get into it, though. We might need something stronger because we will be starting with a brief recap of the last match. Full confession from me, I only watched until the second goal because I was at a family event, at which point when my least favourite player in the Premier League table league scored, McGinn, I believe I slapped the table and then swore and then got a dirty look from my wife, so I couldn't watch the game anymore. But I have watched the highlights, but I'll be running to you guys. Let's keep it brief. One good thing and one bad thing about the match. I'll jump in as well towards the end. Starting with you, Dave. What did you like about what we did and what perhaps something we could have improved or maybe something not even to do with us?
We started well. It's a great goal. Great header by Raul Jimenez and a very good corner. Sasha's second assist from a corner this season. I think it is. I think Gudmundsson own goal. Was that from a Sasha corner as well? I believe.
I think that was Wilson.
Was that Wilson? Okay.
I think so, because he was an in-swinger.
That was an in-swinger, yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Even still, good corner, good header, great start to the game. And actually, we played really well in the first half, didn't we? We created lots of chances. If anything, we were just a bit too wasteful and didn't get the rub of the green with the decisions, which is, leading me on to my one negative, which is just VAR generally, which it has been all season. My second biggest gripe behind PSR is VAR. The two things I think ruining Premier League football, and then just another occasion of why it's just complete load of bollocks, basically. So yeah, that's what I would. That's my summary of the game.
Thanks for letting us know how you really feel about VAR, Dave. You've made that very clear in numerous occasions in the group chat. But Mike, over to you. I think we've hit a couple of the. I don't know how much more good there is, but we're going to give you an opportunity to jump in.
Yeah, so I mean, I probably have to echo the point in terms of our first half performance. I thought while we were wasteful with our chances, was pretty good in the sense of we dominated the play and we were the ones on the front foot. So I liked a lot of what I saw in the first half up at Villa, and again, also nice that we can actually be a threat again from set pieces. We struggled with that last season quite a lot, so that was a positive. Negative, where do I start? Trying to think of something that hasn't already been mentioned. So I don't know. I'm gonna stick up a little bit for Silva's decision to not have Kusiasare on the bench, and the reason for this is he's very young and unproven, and Silva obviously doesn't think he's ready. I think in the situation that we found ourselves in, yeah, you could throw in, someone on for 10 minutes if you need to try and grab a goal or something. But Raul got injured after 3-4 minutes. So to throw somebody on for, what we're essentially thinking would be the best part of 80 minutes could have actually turned out to be worse, because if he's not ready and not up for it, he would have just got swallowed up by Concert and Mings. The fan base might have turned on him, or just it could have got a bit bad for him, and we don't know what his character's like. We don't know if he's the kind of guy who would, rise to the occasion, or he would just get, completely chewed up by two very experienced centre backs, and it could, harm him longer term. So I wasn't necessarily as upset about that as other people were. So I'm just going to stick up for Marco a little bit there.
Yeah, that's a controversial point, but a fair one. I think you're right. We do have to remind ourselves that he is only 18. Having said that, on the other side, he is coming from Bayern and he has played for them. So, but you're right. I would have preferred the ideal scenario. Maybe he'd get 20, 30 minutes at the end. I think 30 is even too much for Marco. But yeah, the whole 80 minutes does seem a little bit of a stretch, though. Yeah, young, green, and unproven. For me, yeah, just to echo what Dave said, we started so brightly, and I was so encouraged because it was all us, I felt, for the first 30 minutes. And don't even get me started about the decisions, otherwise that's going to be the entire pod. But it's, I don't know. And I don't, everyone knows this who's in our group chat, I don't necessarily believe that Marco is overreacting per se. Like, yes, he's very emotional, and yes, I have no doubt that affects the team. But I would argue that this is a little bit of victim blaming here, right? We can't account for two VAR decisions going wrong within the space of what, 5-10 minutes? It's utterly ridiculous. When you have 85% of the vote on the BBC saying Fulham been let down by VAR throughout their season, then I think the fan base and the players and the manager have a right to be aggrieved. So yeah, that's disappointing. And I guess my main negative is that McGinn scored. He's just such an annoying character. I need to censor myself here.
I think it'd be a bit remiss if we didn't mention Josh King, though. I mean, what a performance, especially in that first half. Yeah. I mean, of course, there's a lot of controversy around the penalties that he was involved in, but just actually his performance and his quick feet, his ability to drive forward, his ability to find players and create forward passes, he was absolutely exceptional, and really, really enjoyed his performance. As you say, we could start getting into this whole, all the incidents, and would be here all day. But I think just wanted to highlight. I thought he was excellent.
Yeah, I'd echo that, Dave, as well. I think when we took him off and Iwobi at the same time, I kind of looked at what was left on the pitch and I was like, I don't see where we're scoring here because we've taken our two most dynamic players off. And that kind of played out in some of the later stages of the game. And Mark, you wouldn't have seen this because you're the only person I've ever known to leave early from watching a game on telly. But anyway, we were attacking, we're 2 goals down, and nobody was busting a gut to get in the box. They're all sort of ambling forwards, and you're just thinking, where's the urgency, fellas? So I think taking King and Iwobi off really harmed us in that regard, in that we sort of seemed like we were just settling for what we, what had happened to us, and we didn't want any more damage. So yeah, that was disappointing as well.
What was Marco thinking about that, really, though? I mean, we're 3-1 down, and he's kept Berger and Lukic on the pitch, who, who don't offer a lot of goals and assists, notoriously. And he takes off. I get Josh King might be tired legs a little bit, but surely he's more of a goal threat than Berger or Lukic in a game that we're losing. It just felt really weird. And I'm not quite convinced by your argument on JKA. I think if you've got a striker, a recognised striker, you could put him on the bench. And I'm not saying you bring him on perhaps in the 3rd minute for his debut, but to have an extra striker on the bench that you can bring on later and potentially be a 6'5" man. If we're going to be lumping balls in the box, I'd much rather, towards the end of the game, I'd much rather a 6'5" striker be in there than, as you've just said, 5 wingers all standing around the 18-yard box. So I think Marco, and that's one of the things I think with Marco is that, when all the kind of controversy gets on top of him, I think that he struggles to kind of put that behind him and push on. And it's very rare that we get an occasion where we have controversial decisions and come out on top, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. I think others have said it best as well. We started the game more brightly, but Emery changed his system, and they basically came out different in the second half. Whereas we sort of just stubbornly kept plugging away of the same strategy, and I think this, in my opinion, is what keeps Marco from being a truly elite manager. Yes, we haven't seen him back to the hill yet financially, but so many times I've said on this show, he's stubborn. He has his favorites. When it works, it's great. When it works, we take on teams that have 3 or 5 times our value, and we make them look silly, or at least we give them a really good fight. But even when Plan A isn't working, he seems to stick with Plan A until the 75th minute, and then it's sort of begrudgingly, all right, I guess we'll put on our backup wingers. But what do you guys think? Do you think like there's sort of method in the madness here, or should he be a bit quicker to make his substitutions and maybe a bit more adventurous with his lineup?
I think he has become a little bit formulaic. You know, like he wants a team from the start of pre-season. He wants to embed the system. That's why he doesn't like late business. It's not a match made in heaven, him being involved in this club with the board we have doing last minute business, because he likes them in early because he wants to embed them in. He wants to start the season with a settled team. He rarely wants to change that team unless there's been, really bad performances and losses. He wants to work on that side, and he likes to make substitutions at the same time. He doesn't really like to move away too much from that whole system, and I think he's become more like that actually over the last couple of years, in my opinion. And that's why sometimes I think when we've got problems like Raul getting injured after 2 minutes or controversial decisions going against us, I think he struggles to kind of adapt. He wants to keep that formula when clearly, you need to be a bit braver sometimes and react a little bit quicker, I think. And he's a great manager. He's a fantastic manager. There's no doubt about that. But I just noticed that in him, he's become quite stubborn in how he likes to approach games and not always flexible when he should be in regards to the situation.
I think that's a very fair point, and just sort of chip in there a little bit before I get Mike's take on this. I remember when we first started, maybe I'm sort of, plucking things out of thin air here, but when we first had Marco as a manager, players would say he wants us to play with a smile on our face and to express ourselves. And now, like you said, it feels a bit formulaic. It feels like there's a real emphasis on controlling the game and making sure we stick with a plan. And I want to see a player like Kevin express himself. That's what we bought him for his absurd pace and his flicks and tricks, which are going to beat the man and create those spaces. But maybe Marco needs to see more of that before he's willing to give certain players free reign. And it feels very much like as he should be, largely, he's dictating how we play. But I don't know. Sometimes I'd like to see certain players, flair players, be given the freedom to sort of make their own decisions. But then again, he's the Premier League manager. I'm not. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I can see both sides of it. So, I mean, I don't think he's unique in this. I think there's a lot of managers whose philosophy is very much, if plan A is not working, do plan A better rather than do something entirely different. I think there's a lot to be said for having like a settled team and a settled structure. I'm going to use Man United as an example of the shit show, that the amount of changes they make and move people into random positions. I think Mason Mount finished the game at left wing back on Saturday when they lost to Brentford. There's like a fine line between sort of doing something different and just doing something absurd. And I think Marco will have his structure. They'll work on things through the week that, he's not somebody who doesn't like focus on the opposition. We can see that we've done different things at times depending on an opposition's weakness. So there is an element of, I think, he wants to try and see that through rather than just give up on it too early. So yeah, a stubbornness in his regard. I would possibly sometimes like to see personnel changes quicker rather than say like tactical, fluctuations. We've got a decent squad now. We've got good depth. So, for example, like I was surprised that Wilson stayed on as long as he did on Sunday. I thought Chukwueze did more in 10 minutes than Wilson did in the entire second half. And there's an argument for that. But then, that's the kind of thing that can happen where he probably wants to stick with certain players and give them the opportunity because we've seen them do stuff before that has come out of nothing. So it's tricky. And, Marco kind of tends to work on the basis of the shirt is yours to lose, rather than like just getting rid of people and getting the next cab off the rank too quickly. So yeah, it's a tricky one, but I think you're right though, Mark, in terms of it's maybe what is keeping him from being the absolute, elite level manager that the real top side would come after. But yeah, I don't know. It's a really tricky one. We don't see what goes on the training ground, so when I'd be remiss to sort of say Marco needs to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, very, very good point. And so we remain on our losing streak to Villa, which pains me. Maybe not too many listeners know this, but they're up there with... They're not quite Forest level in terms of who I really, really don't like as a team. But Villa, like I said, I was so confident, wasn't I, in the last pod that I was like, yeah, it's gonna be 2-1 Fulham, absolutely. And now I look a little bit silly, but I maintain the decisions went against us. But that's just sour grapes. So anyway, moving on, we have Bournemouth next, and they were playing away. Obviously, they're an interesting side. They're kind of like the little engine that could. They've done well. Iriola has been an excellent manager for them. I believe they're sitting sixth, so sixth, seventh. Quite high up, higher than us, which is incredible given that you look at their back five, so including the goalkeeper, and they lost. I'm going to mess up the names, but one of the centre backs to PSG. They lost Huijsen to Real Madrid. They lost Kerkez to Liverpool, and then they lost Kepa. Well, he was on loan, I guess, so maybe they didn't lose him. They probably would have liked to keep him. Kepa as the backup goalkeepers at Arsenal. And despite that, they're doing better than us. It's really quite impressive given that they've been torn to shreds. What have you guys, just in general, made of Bournemouth in the last couple of seasons and sort of how they play and who you'd be looking out for? Just give me your thoughts. Let's kick off with Mike.
Yeah, I mean, so Bournemouth are always a fun side to watch, I think. When they're on TV, you kind of tend to be like, oh yeah, I'll watch that game because they're a good side and they play on the front foot. They press the absolute life out of opposition. We've seen that ourselves. I think Evan Nilsson's a good one in the sense of, even though he's not the most prolific goal scorer, he is the one that sets the tempo when they're out of possession. He's the first one that jumps from the press and all of their midfielders follow suit. And he's a real handful to play against. He's constantly on the move. So I really like what I see from him. Cliver is one that kind of, I think, is a bit of a sore point for a lot of Fulham fans because it's what might have been if it wasn't for work permit issues. And one of the grudges I still hold was, I think it was the FA who were responsible for it, who turned down our work permit application because he hadn't played enough at the time and said that Fulham should be using a young player instead. And my response to that was like Harvey Elliott or Fabio Carvalho, who had just been poached by Liverpool. So, what young players? But anyway, that's a moot point. Semenyo's the obvious headline grabber for them. He's been excellent in the seasons that he's been with them since he joined from Bristol City, which, maybe that's an area of the transfer market that we don't explore enough. Players from the Championship who are performing well. And you can see that they did that again this summer with Doak, who had a good season on loan in the Championship last year. And also, I think Alex Scott came from Bristol City as well. So they seem to be really resourceful in terms of like utilising that market and get good value for it. As you say, they lost Kerkez and they've replaced with, I think it's Truffert, who seems to just be, a like-for-like replacement and has been exceptional as well for them. So they're a really enjoyable side to watch, except when you're playing against them, because they give you nightmares and they don't give you any rest. And I think the first 15 20 minutes will be really key for us tomorrow in terms of, can we resist that? We didn't last season. We can it took us about 15 20 seconds before they scored against us, so we need to be a bit more resilient in the early parts of the game to stop them in their momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember. I haven't watched the. I don't think I was there for the away games, but I remember we've had a couple of 2-2s against them in Craven Cottage over the last couple of seasons. So we always seem to give them a good fight. But
At home
yeah,
we
there was
do,
that.
but away we've got a dreadful record. I think it's not as bad as our Villa record, but it's not much better.
That's that's worrying. Very worrying. But hopefully we can turn it around. We do have a Brazilian superstar on our wing and a Nigerian one on the other side. Dave, how would you approach this? Are there any sort of weaknesses or flaws you see in the team, or if you were Marco Silva, give me your thoughts on how you'd take on this Bournemouth team.
God, it really depends on the personnel who's available. Obviously, if
Mm-hmm.
Raul Jimenez is fit, then he's going to start, isn't he? If he's probably even 80% fit, he's going to start. But the way Silva was talking today suggests he might not be. So your guess is as good as mine. Could very well just be Adama, knowing Marco, back up front with the same 11 behind him that started at Villa. That's my kind of, that's not what I would do at all. It's just what I think I could see happening. And Marco just pushing the plan A. I don't think he'll, I don't think Bournemouth show obvious, weaknesses. They've done really well, as you said. They're sixth in the league. They've got lots of good attacking players. Semenyo being obviously the star of the show, and keeping him quiet is going to be like the challenge on tomorrow night. I think if we can keep him quiet and cut out the service, I think he is the main threat. But Michael mentioned Clivert, but Clivert's been a bit out of favour. I don't think he's even started this season. They've been playing Brooks and another guy, Aldi, I think his name is.
I think he started at Leeds last weekend. I think that might have been his first start. But yeah, Adley was the guy they got from Leverkusen in the summer. He's been playing quite a lot as well.
Yeah, so it looks like they're trying to phase. They've got obviously got options. They've got good options. Like Mike said, I think Evan Nielsen's a good player. I think he presses really well, and he will be a threat. He missed a absolute sitter against us last year. I remember he hit the ball off the bar from about a yard out. We were a bit lucky there that one didn't go in. But yeah, he scored 2 at Craven Cottage, I think. So he's a threat. And I think the one that's really impressed me is Scott in midfield. I think he's like really developing now into a top player. He's kind of like the engine room, and he's got good legs. He's up and down the pitch. He's kind of a bit of a goal threat. He's kind of like a number 8 that we don't have, basically. So I think it would be looking out for him. And in terms, still a newly put together defense, and if we can get our act together and create some chances, test them, I think that would be good. But yeah, it does feel like it's going to be a tough night. I'm not kind of expecting a comfortable Fulham victory by any means. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, they're always tough opposition, aren't they? And we haven't even mentioned Petrovic, who I think myself as well as others have been howling for. Really talented goalkeeper, only 25, I believe, and he was with Chelsea for like 1 or 2 seasons, and he was loaned out to Strasbourg, and he's done well there. I think they got him for it wasn't cheap, maybe it was 20 or 25 million, but they managed to wedge him out of Chelsea, and now I think he's going to be their starting goalkeeper for the foreseeable future, and he's a keeper I really rate as well. So yeah,
he's letting a couple of soft goals this season already, though. I think he let him one last weekend actually at his near post. So yeah, he's last season. I thought when I'd seen bits of him, I thought he was the best of the goalies Chelsea had actually before they let him out on loan to Strasbourg. But having seen him this year, I don't think he's fully settled yet, and I have seen a couple of suspect moments. So hopefully he's not as good as we thought he was, and maybe that's an opportunity.
Yeah, 100%. Well, like if he's much shakier than last season, that's only a good thing for us. And we've not been as goal shy recently. I wish we were even more aggressive with the shots we take and speculative. But we'll see how it goes. Still rate him over Sanchez, though. Sanchez is just terrible. But anyway, always have time for a dig at Chelsea. I guess one big piece of news that we have to mention, if you haven't already seen it, is that Muniz has signed a lovely new 5+1. Now, I thought initially everyone was going to be fully on board, but that was not the case, was it, Dave?
Oh, what on Discord earlier today? I think in the
Yes.
main, if you go to Fulham social media, and I suppose if you're at Fulham games, Mooney's has got huge support from the Fulham fan base, and yeah, I didn't see any kind of very rare negative comments on X last night after that news broke. I think in the main, people are particularly happy. But yeah. Skibby was saying that we should have sold him in the summer on the Discord today, and I think the point I was making is I think if Atalanta had reached the fee that we wanted, which was 50 million euros, which would have net us about 35 million after paying off Flamingo's sell-on fee and his amortization fees that are still hitting our P&L. I think if they'd have hit that, I think there would have been an argument for that because he hasn't been a starter. He started 8 games last season. And the only problems that I had with it is, it was quite late in the window when Atalanta got involved in the conversation. It was like mid-August, and they were offering 35 million euros, which after paying all the sell-on fees and everything like that was going to give us about just north of 20 million pounds with a couple of weeks to try and find a replacement. I just thought that made zero sense. But it was clear that his head was turned. I mean, I think he mentioned that in his interview that his head was a bit scrambled during the summer. He was obviously attracted to the prospect of playing Champions League football, which is fair enough. I get that. And he was also, I think, feeling a bit undervalued, given the fact that he has scored goals off the bench. He's not got the starts perhaps he wanted, but also he's been on, his initial contract, which he got when he came in at 20 years old in the Championship as a sub striker for the last 4 years, and the club should have sorted that out a long time ago. So I think this is good news because I think it'll, I think it's rewarding him, and hopefully that comes with a bigger salary that will make him feel valued. And now he can put the kind of transfer speculation behind him, at least for now, and focus on just doing the business for Fulham. So I think it's really good news, and we should be tying young players like that down to long deals, and so that we make sure we get paid properly when they do eventually leave.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I got a hypothetical for you then, Mike. So we've moved on to next season. We've had a lovely, lovely finish in 10th, as per usual. Decent cup run. Muniz is now on a long-term contract. What are our striking options like? Do you think we roll the dice on Kusi Asare? Do you think we give Raul another 1-year contract because we love giving older players bumper contracts? Or do you think we maybe go out into the market, drop both of them, and find someone new? What are your thoughts?
I think when it comes to Raul, I expect that this will be his last year, not just with us, but as a Premier League player. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe, he wanted to stay at this level and play so that he could be Mexico's starting centre forward for a home World Cup for them. I would expect him to maybe move to like a less sort of demanding league, but still get paid a decent amount. So maybe something like MLS or something along those lines. But I think that we would need to be looking to bring in somebody to sort of challenge for a starting position up against Muniz. We don't want to be in a position where if Muniz is injured like he is at the moment, the second choice isn't adequate. We need to be having competition for places. A mid-table Premier League club, we need to have good options so that we can, make changes like we've talked about. We want to have those options on the bench that if it's not going well, that we can bring on equal quality rather than having a drop off. I'm a bit sort of, disappointed, Mark, that you said that we won't be playing in Europe next year, though. So, because then we could have 2 strikers that are, going to get, ample minutes each, and, then we could bring in a higher caliber of player. But I'll let that slide for now and go with the current situation. I think we'd want somebody maybe younger. I was hoping that we would maybe do that this summer, in the sense of the player that we brought in as the third choice would have a bit of time to acclimatise and then become, second or even competing for that starting berth next year. We've obviously not done that. We don't know much about Kusiaseri. He might become that. We don't know. And we're obviously not getting the opportunity to see that. The League Cup games didn't present us with that. So it doesn't seem like that's going to be likely to materialise. At least not, until we maybe get like somebody in the lower leagues in the FA Cup in January. But I would like to see us have, real competition for places, a real high caliber talent that we could, be putting into the first team and not have to bed them in after a while. I've always kind of felt that we could do with players that are a bit flexible position wise. Our two centre forwards can only play centre forward, and they can't really play together. Maybe we need to look at somebody who can play, anywhere across the front line, like some of the other teams, in the league have. They've got those, forwards. I think, say for example, Jorginho Ruta at Brighton can play as the absolute central striker, or he can play as like a more drop-off number 10 player. You've also got players that can play either wide or through the middle. Maybe we just need to have that as an option, and then we don't need to sort of stockpile so many wingers if we've got somebody who could shuffle out wide to do a job if we need them to.
Yeah, fantastic point. I mean, we already brought in a youngster with promise and decent caliber, but that would be far too sensible to sort of play him and then get him acclimatized and then sign him for some, I think it was some peanut fee. It's rumored, but like 12 million or 15 million. Like, come on. As a Premier League team, as a comfortably mid-table aspirational Premier League team with billionaire owners, you would hope that that wouldn't be an issue. But we always like to drag our transfers out, so there's that. Maybe
There's
Anthony
another point,
Robinson
Mark.
could
Though
put in a call. Yeah,
is that Marco? We're all saying he's just being stubborn with Kusiasari, and but he's quite adamant. He's doubling down on the fact that he said, even in today's press conference, that he doesn't think he's ready. He's looking at this guy on the training pitch. Now, everyone assumes it's just because he's not a Marco pick. It was a player that the club brought in late, and he's young, and that's not Marco's style. But he's doubling down on the fact that he thinks he's not ready. And as frustrating as that is, perhaps Marco has a little bit, earned a little bit of benefit of the doubt on that. We don't see this guy in training. He might look a bit like a rabbit in the headlights on training and not ready for Premier League football. So, as much as I think he should be introduced more on the bench, particularly at the moment, because we're in a difficult situation, and we don't really have any other options. And given his height and his, he could be an option late in the game. I'm also kind of not thinking he should be thrown straight into the starting 11 if Marco doesn't think he's ready. I think we should probably give him a bit more of the benefit of the doubt on that one.
Look, 100% agree. That's a very valid point. My rebuttal to that, just to play devil's advocate, is he doesn't need to play against a Premier League team. He can play against Cambridge, or he can play against Wycombe Wanderers, right? Like, we should be fine to, with respect, dominate the game, even with Kusiasare out of it, being a rabbit in headlights with the other 10 players we have, or the other 9 outfield players we have on the pitch. But yeah, maybe up against Premier League opposition, early days. So you're right about that. Very good. Cool. So let's move on. We have a couple of questions given to us in our Discord. Quick Discord shout out for those of you who are listening and not members. We are growing at a rapid pace. Let me check real quick. Where are we at? I think we're at 516 members. So that's very positive. You get to go on there, meet like-minded Fulham fans, engage in a bit of banter. There's memes flying around. People are getting into friendly discussions about whether players played well or badly, and there may or may not be a stream kicking about if you might or might not be interested in watching it on certain days. So that's always fun. But let's get started with the questions. Let me just pull it up here. Where are we? Well, this is a one that you raised, Dave, and this is meant to be a talking point, so let's get right into it. Sander Berger, is he actually that good? The argument against. Dave, please go ahead.
No, I just think that when he first came into the team, that's kind of not quite at the very start of last season because we signed him late. What a surprise! But he came in around October, I think. First few months, I thought he was absolutely brilliant. He was just such a presence in midfield. He was great on the ball, and I just think he's declined. His performances have declined. I think they were declining at the second half of last season. And I don't think he's been particularly impressive at the start of this season. I still believe he's an 8 and not 6. I think he's being shoehorned into that position and being restricted by Marco, in elements of his game I think are really strong, which is driving forward with the ball and shooting, which we've all seen, and we still see it for the national team. I just don't think he's a natural 6. I don't think he's particularly thriving in that role, and I think he's looks at the moment to be a very average player. I mean, maybe I'm being harsh, but I'm just not very impressed.
Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, I take Dave's point. I think that what Berger does well for us is when we're on top. I feel like he's really good at squeezing the play and helping us sustain attack. So if we've got a team under the cosh, they don't get out very easily because he's very good at kind of winning the ball up higher up the pitch and recycling it to keep us in those positions. I think he struggles when the tide is turned against us, like we saw on Sunday. I just felt that him and Lukic kind of got bullied by McGinn and Villa's midfield, particularly in the second half, where they just couldn't stop the flow against us. And we're probably a little bit spoilt by having Polina for 2 years, in that he was great in those situations, and what Lukic and Berger between them bring isn't the same skill set, and it's not the same level of quality certainly in defensive situations. So I think that we've probably yet to see the best of Berger, but I don't think that he's somebody who I would be dropping at the moment. I know it's not the most popular opinion that him and Lukic play together every week, but I feel like the more they play together and build that kind of partnership, and it can improve. We know that Lukic is inevitably going to get booked sooner or later, so we'll have to make a change in there because he'll be suspended. But I think that with Berger, it's one of those things where we kind of need to keep the faith with him. We've spent a fair bit of money on him. His physical attributes suggest that he should be able to do the job. Maybe it's just a case of he's in a bit of a bad run of form at the moment, which can happen to any player. So I certainly wouldn't be casting him out of the team, mainly as well because we don't have sufficient like for like quality in terms of the backup players. Kenny and Reed are good sort of squad players, but I wouldn't be bringing them in favour of either Lukic or Berger.
The only counter I'd have on that point, though, is that I'm not suggesting that I think there are games where Lukic and Berger are the right partnership, and even Villa, arguably lining up for that game, that would be a classic example. Away from home, we want to be hard to beat, and we should have enough attacking players, in the 10 and on the wings to cause problems. But at home against Leeds, I don't think we need to be playing Lukic and Berger, two players who are more defensive. I think that one of them, probably Berger, should come out in a game like that. And I'm not suggesting Kearney and Reid come in. I think that, yes, we've been crying out for a number 8 for the last 3 seasons and haven't addressed that yet. But I think that there's an opportunity for Alex Iwobi or Josh King to play in that position. Players that are a bit more creative and will help us and help the attacking players create more opportunities. And that also frees up a space for another winger to come in, like Kevin or Chukwueze. So I think that they're playing them two at home in games we should win is too negative, and it is stifling us a little bit and making it harder to break down those low blocks that we notoriously struggle against.
Great point, Dave. And I think Iwobi in the 8 has been touted by quite a few Fulham fans. My tinfoil hat reasoning why Marco may not be so willing to employ this immediately is, what is it, show management, right? Or the board, if it works. Then they're going to go, oh, so you didn't need an 8 after all. Like, Iwobi could play there. Great. So maybe he is leaving. I'm not saying he's throwing games. Obviously, he's not. He's a manager. He wants to win games. He wants to take us as far as he can. But maybe he's trying to prove a point that we are missing a spot. We've lost a player and we haven't replaced them. So, yeah, fair point. Good point.
That's going to spite himself, though, because if we don't perform well as a team because Marco's not playing the best players and the best system, he's not going to be, recruited by the top clubs. So I get what you're saying. And, I think I've accused him of doing that before. But if you really think about it, I just can't see that really being an option for Marco. I think it's just a case of, he doesn't like changing the system. He's got 2 centre mids there that he likes, and he's worked on them, and he wants his push plan A. It's keep pushing plan A.
I think as well with that, sorry, Dave, is that he likes the spine of his team to have a big physical presence, and Berger is a big lad. So there's maybe just that element to it as well, that he wants to persevere, rather than if you take him out of the side, we probably lose quite a bit of stature in that sense.
Yeah.
Fair point. Next one from Daza. Was Marco neglecting our obvious need for a 9 on the bench out of spite due to how business was conducted / JKA Kusiasare not being his type of player? I'm going to jump in here with my 2 cents real quick, and then I want to get you guys' take on it. I was very excited when Kusiasare was signed, and we had that little profile that someone put on Discord, and it seems like he has a bit of a chip on his shoulder, which is not a bad thing. Sort of, he grew up in a rougher neighborhood, and football was his outlet. But with these kind of players, maybe they need to be handled with care, right? Kind of like how ESR is, and sort of how we're trying to get him to grow in confidence, and he's doing better for us from that aspect. So maybe it's not that the ability isn't there. Clearly the ability is there, but that's why Bayern signed him on a permanent and extended his contract. Maybe it's an attitude thing. I don't know. What do you guys think?
So I don't necessarily think it's to do with Kusiasare himself. I think there's an element of that we've got depth in the squad now. So there's a lot of senior pros, and if you're leaving one of them out for an unproven 18-year-old, that's going to ruffle a few feathers, particularly if Marco doesn't particularly rate said 18-year-old. I can't think of exactly off the top of my head what the bench was on Sunday, but obviously we had Kevin Chukwueze and Traore all on there. I think Kenny and Reed were both on there.
Yeah.
And then, but so it's like, that's a lot of senior pros, but if one of them has to miss out, they might have the hump. And then it's a case of, there's a lot of, squad harmony issues. We've always heard Guardiola likes to work with a small squad so that you can keep everyone happy. And this is coming from a club that plays 60 odd games a season. So there is an element of trying to manage the collective, and it's possibly best not to ruffle any feathers. I think when we had everybody fit, Harrison Reed was missing out the last couple of games, and he's not somebody that kind of you think would throw a bit of a sulk if that was the case. But then if you're leaving others out, they might do. We just don't know what the characters are like. So there's a degree of maybe it's just seniority is what's winning the day rather than particular ability.
Dave, anything to add?
No, I agree with Michael. I think it's partly that, and I think it's partly, I think that's a big part of it. Squad, managing egos, managing squad, experienced players. But Marco, has reiterated that in his opinion, he doesn't think the player's ready, and it's going to be a long time till he is. So I'm inclined to, as I said before, give him the benefit of the doubt on that. We don't see him on the training ground. So, Marco does every day, and he makes the judgment, gets a lot of things right. I know we've been quite critical today, but Jesus, he gets a lot of stuff right. And also, the fact that, as Mike said, you've got to manage the squad and, keep players happy. So it's a tricky one. I still think he got it wrong on Sunday. Michael disagree. I think he should have at least been on the bench, and I think I think he could have helped us towards the end of the game as an option. The players that we brought on, I don't think we obviously didn't have a striker on the pitch at the end of the game, and we were throwing crosses into the box, and I think he'd be an option in there. But Marco's not comfortable doing that, so we have to think of other ways to cover Muniz and Rel when they're injured until Marco deems this guy worthy.
Jeez, that might be a while, eh? All right. Well, next question from Mr. Korn. Should Marco take the Sam Allardyce approach and sit up in the stands during games? Is he just too emotionally involved at pitch level, and does this emotion transfer to the players?
I think, what was it when we played Sunderland in the Cup a few years ago, and he was suspended because he'd got the amount of yellow cards, and they kept cutting the camera to him, and he was there surrounded by nobody, and he was still doing his nut. He was still absolutely losing it. So I don't think it makes any difference for Marco Silva personally where he is situated. I think that he's such a demanding manager that he wants to be as close to the action as possible so that he can influence what is going on the pitch. I like that he's emotional because he cares and he wants to. And I'm not saying that you don't have to be ranting and raving all the time to show that you're passionate and that you care. But I think that it helps rather than hinders, except sometimes he can be a little bit too volatile with the officials when things are going against us, and maybe that causes a distraction. But I don't know. I'd leave it to the manager themselves to judge where they best think the vantage point that gets the best out of what they are looking to do. It might be something that you maybe stick one of the coaches up in the stands, and then they could see if they can spot things that they can relay, either at half time or even just in game through communications. But yeah, I think Silva and most Premier League managers like to be on the touchline because they can influence the players directly. And also as well, maybe the officials as well a little bit. So,
Great points. Dave?
No, I don't think it makes much difference whether he's in the stand or on the side of the pitch. I always think that when managers get that touchline ban, I always think doesn't really make much difference. I don't really get why the manager being a bit further up in the stands is a massive, punishment in my opinion. But I think I do put more weight than Mike on Marco's, the negative aspect of Marco's emotion. I do think that, he is kind of leading the charge, and when we have decisions go against us and he gets upset, I think the players feel it, and I think the fans feel it, and they all start singing Marco's right, the refs are shite, and the players start getting their heads down. And I think that I think he doesn't really lead by example, and when those situations happen, put it behind him and focus on the game. I think he lets it get on top of him, and I think it gets on top of all of us. And very rarely do we come back from adversity like that. We usually, when we have those decisions go against us and Marco gets really upset, we normally go on to lose the game. And we all seem to lose our heads a bit. So I do think that's a bit of an issue, but I don't think putting him further up in the stand is going to make, is going to be the solution to that problem, which I think was what Mr. Korn was asking in that in that question. I think it's just, that's the, I suppose you've got to take the good with the bad a little bit. Marco is an emotional manager. Can't hide it. But I do think that it doesn't always work for us when it gets on top of him.
I think just on that point though, Dave, we know he's emotional. He's not gonna curb that. We should try to use that to our advantage and create like a siege mentality. I think, Mourinho was famous for it when he first came into the Premier League, in that everyone's against us. These bastards are trying to screw us. We get our heads down too much and it's, oh, woe is me, when actually we should be like, we're going to beat the fuckers anyway, even if the refs don't want us to win. And we should be trying to use that emotion to, cultivate like a spirit amongst the team, rather than, everyone's against us and we can't do anything about it. We should be almost kind of like, trying to defy the odds, because you've seen like in the weeks that we've had, I think 5 of the 6 Premier League games we've had subjective VAR or refereeing decisions, all of them go against us, and we should be trying to use that as to our advantage in terms of like team building and like creating that kind of atmosphere within the team and within the club, that we can come back from this. And I think Marco's emotion can kind of lead us into that. But at the moment, it does sort of feel like it errs more towards the, oh, well, what can we possibly do if this is going against us?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the point. I think it's that's what should happen, but that's not what's happening. I'm not seeing that reaction from our players, and I think Marco is the leader. He's the catalyst for that.
Sure.
That kind of culture. So that's where I'm saying I think that is a problem, but I think it's just part of his character. But it definitely doesn't serve as well.
I'm gonna sort of take the other side a little bit here. I completely agree that it sets us back at times, but I do really like that he's passionate. And I think you have to draw attention to it, because if you just have bad decisions go against you over and over again, you just sit there and calmly say, well, that's not how I see it, then I think to an extent, you're letting people get away with it. And while I want us to have that siege mentality and win despite the odds, I think we're almost too nice as a fan base, in that these decisions could go against us, and if we win, we'll be relaxed about it. Whereas I'm the kind of pedantic child where I'd still raise that those decisions went against us even though we won, and draw attention to it, because I just got a big thing about fairness and equality. But yeah, fair enough. Those are good points raised all around. Just a couple more to see us off. This guy loves changing his name, so I'm going to try and get through as many of them as I can. Olivia Dale's boyfriend, aka Rhea Ripley's husband, aka Dua Lipa's future fiance, I want to say, aka Daenerys Targaryen's first sword, make of that what you will, says, should Fulham have taken the 40 million for Muniz? I think so. Use the last season of Raul and buy some great talent next year. I mean, I guess we covered this a little bit, but there were early links to Ricardo Pepe, the American connection there with Robinson. Very good for full America. I don't know. I think I'm still happy. My immediate reaction when we signed him on a 5+1, I felt good, because I think he's at the level we need him to be right now, ready to go, and I think he can improve. And therefore, we're at least protecting ourselves as a club, in that we can get even more value in 1 or 2 years' time. All he needs is, we live in a crazy market. All he needs is one great season, and suddenly some idiot in the top 4 is going to be like, okay, 70 million. So I'm happy we kept him. 40 million is not a bad price.
If we weren't offered that, though, according to reports, we weren't offered that. I think we were holding out for 50 million euros, and Atalanta had offered us 30 million and then 32.5 million euros or something like that. That's nowhere near 40 million pounds, so that's the problem. I think if we were offered 40 million pounds, I think he wouldn't be here.
I think you're right. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'm happy we kept him, but what do you guys think? I guess we've chatted about it a little bit, but 40 million pounds for Muniz? You're Tony, would you take it?
I mean, I think there's more to come from him as a player. I think we can see that he's improving. And I think that if we were going to cash in on him, we can do it later for more money. But also, I'd like to see us be in a position to do it where it's on our terms, as in we're ready to sell him. We've got something lined up already, rather than us scrambling like we were at the end of this window to try and get business done. So maybe that's a wider point on how the club operates rather than the individual player. But I like Muniz. I think you can tell that he cares and that he's passionate, and that he's, it was such a shame that goal against Brentford got ruled out, because you could just see the emotion in him when he scored that goal, how much of a relief it was, but also how pleased he was to be able to do that. And I'd like to see more of those from Muniz at the Cottage for a few more years to come.
That was an absolute rocket from Muniz. I was so certain it was 4-1 until the VAR check and every Brentford player started complaining, and then it was like, well.
Just a final point on that. I don't think that we've missed our chance as well with, a fee for Muniz. I think some people think, perhaps we think he's better than he is, and he's not going to hit those heights. And that is a fair enough and reasonable opinion. Until he does, he hasn't, So, but what I would say is, because he's 24, he's Brazilian, and he scored nearly 20 goals in the Premier League, I think he can even have a bad season and still command a decent fee. A newly promoted team like Leeds this year will look at that and go, oh, we've got money. We need a player who's played in the Premier League and scored goals, and he's a bit out of favour now at Fulham. I'll give you 30 million for him. Or a team from abroad, will be attracted to the fact that he's performed in this league. So I don't think there's much value he can drop, even if he plays that badly, purely just because of his age. I think if he was 28, 29, it'd be a completely different story. But I think for the time being, I don't think it's going to drop that far if he plays badly. But if he plays well, it could go skyrocket. And I think that's the thing.
100%. And we've, like you said, he's young, so there's resale value. If we signed him and he was 29, then how much resale value is there? A lot less, right? So great point there. We'll finish with our last question from Spanish FFC Ultras. After listening to the Blue Brothers, aka Dave and Skibby, debate regarding Muniz and Raul, should we not ask the question, is Marco holding up the progression of the academy and JKA with his stubbornness with regard to bringing players in? Also, should Muniz go, who is a 20-plus striker?
That's a great question.
Wow, there's not many of them. There's not many of them, are there? Otherwise, they've all been snapped up.
Look, everyone, you'd have to take a gamble.
Yeah.
You'd have to take a gamble.
Yeah.
That's the thing. There's no guarantees, so especially at a club our level.
I was going to jump in and
Mitrovic
say,
was a one-off.
Yeah, indeed. And I was watching Arsenal Olympiacos yesterday. I managed to join a friend and get tickets. And Gyökeres looks good, but in my eyes, he's no Haaland, right? He's not an Ekitike who's also hit the ground running, or Isak. So it's difficult. Even if you have an outstanding season abroad, it's no guarantee it's 20 plus in the Prem. Mike, exactly. Dave, any ideas?
No, I genuinely couldn't tell you. Forget whoever we bring in. I mean, someone like Ricardo Pepi you mentioned might be worth a shout because he's young and, he's got a bit of pedigree in Europe, but it's a gamble. There's no guaranteed 20-goal season striker that Fulham are missing out on at the moment. You just have to bring in someone and hope it worked. But yeah, Mike, well, you probably know more players than I do.
To be honest, no, I agree with your point, Dave, in the sense that you could identify players, but none of them have scored 20 goals in a season yet. Because if they do, they're off to a big club immediately because there's just not many of them around now. So you are gambling and you're looking at what they could become. And that's where I think as we touched on with the last question about Muniz, we've signed him now to a long-term contract in the sense that what he could become could pay off for us. Somebody could, come and pay a hell of a lot of money if he has a 20-goal season for us. Essentially, I think as well, though, the way that clubs like us operate, we can't be relying on one goal scorer. We need goals from everywhere. And that's what I've liked about us in recent seasons, in that a lot of our players have chipped in with 5, 6, 7 goals. And that's really helped us because, as much as Mitrovic was good for us, particularly in that first season up in the Premier League, kind of proving that he did belong at the level. The previous seasons when we went down and he struggled, nobody else was scoring goals for us, not on a consistent basis. And we didn't have any. We were relying on even Caballero to try and score a goal for us. And it's we're better off looking for players that have got the potential to maybe do that, or the kind of, seasoned pros, like, for example, Raul is doing for us, but also say like a Danny Welbeck is doing for Brighton. He's had a resurgence in his career because they're not relying on him to score all of the goals, but he'll chip in with a good number and also contribute, with assists and just his general, hold up play and link play. And that's where I feel like we need to shop in that market, because anybody that's scoring 20 goals plus in Europe is either playing for a top side or very soon will be.
Yeah, very fair points. I think that's all the questions we have time for
I've got
today.
one more for you, Mark, because I
here we
just was
go.
thinking about
Go on, then.
thinking back about Bournemouth, and did you didn't get an opportunity to tell us who you think might start on Saturday? Do you think there'd be much changes, and also what are you as confident in this one as you were against Villa?
Well, whatever I seem to predict, I get it wrong. So I'm gonna predict a loss for us then. But yeah, I think you guys pretty much hit the nail on the head. Raul will start if he's fit. If he's not fit, which seems likely, it's gonna be a drama. I've said it before. Marco Silva is stubborn. He has his favorites. Even if he doesn't have his favorites, we made the seniority argument, stuff like that. I just really hope that JK makes the bench. I really and if the match is done, if we're chasing the game 3-0 down, throw him on for 10 minutes in a low stakes environment. Get him at least on the pitch. Show him that he has some small inkling of hope if he works hard and proves himself. Because I think there's really so little point in getting a deadline day deal done and a 4 million loan fee for him to not even make the bench. So I agree with you guys. It's going to be a tough match. You asked me this question last time with regard to Villa, and I'm going to answer it differently now. I would take a point away against Bournemouth, especially Mike having told me what our record is. So I'll definitely take that point. Hope for more, but it will be tough. But hopefully the boys are up for it, and they want to do right by the sort of very, very strange performance we had the last 30 minutes for the last game.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Mark. I think that if Marco's ever going to make changes, he tends to do that after we've had a defeat, and particularly a second half performance like we had on Sunday. It won't be wholesale changes. It'll be like one or two. Maybe Robinson back in for Sessegnon, for example, and a different winger than, say, Wilson. But it won't be a lot of changes. But yeah, I'm optimistic in terms of. I think we might get a 1-1 draw there.
Good stuff. All right, and with that, I guess we will see everyone off. So, Dave, thanks for joining. It's been a pleasure.
No, it's been nice to not be hosting. I could just relax, as I said, enjoy the beer, get involved in the conversation. So yeah, it's been a nice little break, and thanks for doing such a great job.
Always happy to give hosting a try. And Mike, thank you for joining us in that lovely lime green away shirt.
Yeah, absolutely. And best after dark host I think we've had so far, Mark. So well done, mate.
Oh, I'd agree with that. That feels like a fair and unbiased comment. So that's very good. Anyway, I will see us off. So thank you so much for listening, guys. And we'll finish with you whites.